L3 Capital is a private equity real estate firm with a simple focus: prime urban retail in some of America's best submarkets. From SoHo in New York to Gold Coast in Chicago to Williamsburg back in New York again. I don't know why I put them in that order, but anyway, they find the streets where people want to be and they invest in them. So today we're going to talk with Whitney Robinette with L3 Capital. Live from Las Vegas, it's Where We Buy. That's right, you're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. Today we're live from the JLL booth at ICSC Las Vegas 2026. Welcome to Where We Buy, Whitney.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, well, we were so excited to get you because there's nothing I love more than talking about cool neighborhoods in cool cities with cool retail. And you guys are kind of the experts around that. So just a level set for anybody that's not familiar, what is the L3 strategy?
So the L3 strategy is pretty simple. Location, location, location.
Oh, right. L3.
Yes. And you gave a good intro on that. We're focused on prime urban retail. So we only invest in the top major metros in the United States. For us, that's Boston, New York, Miami, DC, of course, Chicago, and then on the West Coast, LA and San Francisco.
Okay.
And we really just focus on those markets based on where urban retailers want to be.
So tell me about the properties, maybe some example properties that you guys own.
Sure. So we're really known for a lot of our high street, high profile buildings because they're very well located and they typically have an exciting tenant that people are familiar with. But we do invest in neighborhoods as well, and we're known for aggregating portfolios in the markets that we invest in. We have a variety of tenants, but some of our, more recent tenants that people may recognize us for include, Skims, Vuori. We do have Lululemon. We have Levain. The categories are pretty broad, but I think every retailer that you hear about in an urban market, we usually have either in our portfolio or have a relationship with.
Okay. And so the buildings, there's a ground floor retail and then different uses above?
Yes, a little bit of everything. Mostly retail. We have multi-retail buildings, multi-floor retail buildings. And then because of the locations, we do sometimes have a mixed-use component, primarily boutique office or a little bit of residential.
Okay. You named some tenants, because I'm a retail real estate person, I get the vibe. But for folks that aren't familiar, what do your tenants have in common? Like, what makes an L3 tenant?
That's a great question. The L3 tenant has a lot in common with what we're looking for. Obviously, they look at the physical real estate and they love the location. But generally speaking, our tenants have an urban customer, so somebody that maybe has some disposable income, that is Gen Z or millennial primarily, and that needs some type of good that suits their needs, right? Whether it's fashion, apparel, some type of accessory, etc. Now, we do have service tenants. We have tenants across all categories, but they're looking for the best locations in these markets that have high density, high foot traffic, a lot of visibility. They create a marketing aspect around these locations. And then the tenants themselves, which is common in retail, they want to have an experiential component of some sort that could be very noticeable or very minor, but something that makes their store very special. And their requirements are generally in line with what we're looking for in our physical real estate.
What are some cool examples of some experiential elements that some of your tenants have done?
So that's a great question. I think we have seen a lot of incorporation with community in some of these stores.
Oh, yeah, that is popular, isn't it?
Exactly. So tenants, one specifically that comes to mind is Lululemon in Fulton Market in Chicago. Their store is a very typical Lululemon, but they have on the outside of the building in the window, they have a mural by a female artist, right? So something little like that you might walk by and notice and pause. That is not necessarily associated with the brand, but it enhances, the quality of that. And then we do see a lot of tenants have technology, built into their stores. On Running is obviously very focused on that. And then It's more about when you're shopping in the space, there'll be a moment of pause. So, for example, the Skims location in Chicago, if you go into the basement of the retail store,
Okay.
they have these incredible light fixtures that makes it seem like you're outside. So little things like that that may not necessarily be experiencing the product or the offering, but that certainly create the experience when you walk into the location.
Wow, that's really cool. And now some of the tenants in your buildings you are going to see in, higher quality, suburban retail locations. But a lot of them, I really feel like I only see them in the city. That's mostly true?
That is true. A lot of our tenants that we work with that are in our portfolio or that we try to get to know, when they're expanding in the United States, they generally have a focus on getting on the coasts. So they want to be in New York, they want to be in LA, and then they need a midpoint in Chicago. It seems like a theme with a lot of our tenants that are looking for urban are not looking for scale necessarily. Yeah. They're really focused on those submarkets. They have a few places where they want to be in the cities, and they'll be very selective. They're not going to do every submarket, but they'll identify 3 or 4 of them. Usually we're in all 3 or 4 of those, and then they really hone in and say, okay, where can I get the best bang for my buck, and what space is available, and what will make the most impact. So they're being very thoughtful with their site surveys. They're being very thoughtful with the physical real estate. Usually we're creating that formula for them, and the pieces come together.
Gotcha. So the neighborhoods that you're in, you really do, they do share a vibe in a lot of ways. No, not exactly, but like I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm looking at Williamsburg and then SoHo. I mean, like there's similarities, but there's definitely differences there. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit. Let's start in New York. So you're in Williamsburg, you're in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, SoHo, in Manhattan. Those are your 2 spots for New York?
Primarily,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you come up with those? And what do you talk a little bit more about the similarities and differences between them?
Great question. So let's talk about SoHo.
Okay.
That's a market that we've owned historically in for many years. I think our first investment was in 2012. And currently we have 4 buildings in that market. That market, if you know, has always been a priority for retailers. Almost every brand that you find has a SoHo location. And that submarket has many pockets of options for brands to go. Broadway has more of a high street or fast fashion type customer. It's very dense. There's a lot of pedestrians. Then you have Green Street, which tends to be a little bit more on the luxury. You have Spring and Prince, which is very luxury. And then you have West Broadway, which has a little bit of a different identity with a little bit 24/7 kind of restaurants and galleries and a little bit more experience. We see that market as somewhere we have to invest because there's always going to be inherent demand for SoHo. And our portfolio right now has, through the 4 buildings, we have exposure to each of those streets I just mentioned. So we have one on Broadway, which our tenants there are very service-driven, very high-profile, high-rent-paying tenants. On Green Street, we just did a Canada Goose flagship. They're relocating from Worcester to try and reposition and get into a bigger space at 7276 Green. Then we have Spring Street, where we have an innovation concept by Chanel in one of our buildings, where they're kind of experimenting with different facets of their business that may or may not be associated with Chanel, but that allow them to get creative with what they can offer. And then we have a gallery building on West Broadway that is a very well-renowned international gallery that chose that location because it gets them the address and, but it's clusters with the rest of the galleries over there. So my point being, there's a ton of variety, there's a ton of categories. The downside risk is mitigated because there's always going to be demand. And even in the worst of times, in COVID, where things got really bad, there was a lot of vacancy, it has proven itself out to be where retailers still want to go. Yeah. So we take that thesis and we look at other markets and try to find the next location where brands want to be. And obviously New York is very dense. Brooklyn itself is its own ecosystem. And that takes us over to Williamsburg, if that's appropriate to transition over there.
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump on the subway and head down.
Well, so that's the point. Williamsburg is one subway stop from Manhattan. It's a 15-minute ride. And so we realized that it has great transportation over there. The area in 2005 was rezoned. So over the last 20 years, Williamsburg has really transitioned into a live, work, play identity. It still has a very creative culture. There's a lot of strong demographics over there, and a lot of the people that live there realize, I can just take one subway stop from my office building and be in a quieter area that's still very dense and has a lot to offer. So when we looked at Williamsburg, we were not the leaders in the market. Apple had signed their lease, Whole Foods was there, and WeWork was very popular at the time. Those three tenants were sort of anchoring the neighborhood. And we were able to amass a portfolio over 5 years and acquire about 25 buildings, mostly on North 6th and Bedford in the neighborhood, right off of the subway station.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple parcels, on North 7th and Wythe and a little bit off Main and Main. But we were able to create a lot of land to then convert these industrial buildings that were over there at the time into retail. And what Williamsburg offers that SoHo doesn't, for example, is a little bit of a different architectural interest in the buildings. SoHo is classic and everyone loves SoHo architecture. But when you go to Williamsburg, you get a little bit of grunge. It's industrial. It's less dense from a FAR perspective for retail. And brands realized that they could do something that they weren't able to do in other markets and kind of test out products and experiences because the customer was just a little bit different. So we started doing that. It took us 5 years to get our portfolio. We slowly developed this retail nucleus of typical retailers you see everywhere, right? We brought in Nike, we brought in COS, we brought in Hermes, which we should talk about. And over time, the neighborhood has really become established from a retail perspective and is on a lot of tenants' radars.
Yeah. So what is it about Hermes that's notable?
So Hermes, if you had asked a lot of people maybe 10 years ago.
Would Hermes go into Brooklyn?
Yeah, would Hermes go into Brooklyn?
No.
No, that doesn't make any sense. But Hermes thought that was an opportunity for them to capture an audience. And they actually, we did a flagship deal with them. We did base building construction. We delivered a beautiful, exterior building for them that they helped design. And they're building out their flagship store right now. But what they did was during that process, they rented space for us for 3 years and did an Hermes pop-up. And they sold product in that store that you can't get anywhere else. And so they created this buzz about the brand. It helped the neighborhood. And they realized that they had enough demographic information for Brooklyn to plant a flag in that borough. And Williamsburg is what they chose.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you guys have a retailer that's doing a social club concept. Tell us about that.
We do. It's very exciting. So there are now 3 luxury retailers in Williamsburg, Hermes, Rolex, and Breitling.
Mm-hmm.
We did a deal with Breitling. They're taking about 20,000 square feet in an old industrial building that was occupied by Urban Outfitters at one point in time. And they fell in love with the building first, and then they fell in love with the location. And what they're doing is creating a social club for the brand. So they have a rich history, and they are very proud of that. And what they want to do is to bring people into the brand to experience it in a different way. They're always going to be known for their timepieces. They're always going to be known for their luxury. But they felt like by doing a social club, it was going to create a different space for people to enjoy what they have to offer, have a common, element with other people that love the brand, and just create another culture that they could continue to build up that customer loyalty over time.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was just reading about, I think it was Rolex opened up a location in the Hamptons that's in this old historic building, and it's not exactly a social club, but it is kind of a hangout space. Mm-hmm. Like it's much about hanging out like in the backyard and the Hamptons vibe as it is, just buying a watch. So, I think that's the way things are going, especially for luxury, of creating the place as much as the product. Do you see more brands doing social clubs? Is that like the thing that's on the horizon, or has it happened and I just missed it?
No, I think social clubs in general in New York are a lot more predominant than they are in other markets.
For sure.
And we're hearing social clubs in general are taking off and people are enjoying them. I think from a retailer perspective, there have been other luxury categories experiencing and experimenting with having a food and beverage component in their store, or something that pulls you in, makes you spend time, makes you spend more money, makes you enjoy it. Breitling, I think, is the only one that's doing it in New York from a luxury retailer perspective that's comprehensive, as far as I know. And they're certainly using this as their first social club to try it out, and then ultimately want to expand globally with this brand.
Gotcha. And so one of the markets you didn't mention, or did you? Did we talk about San Francisco?
We haven't talked about San Francisco.
I know that you did a Rivian flagship in San Francisco. How did that come about?
So this is actually going to take a pivot
Okay.
because we have great relationships with our retailers. And Rivian, we were working with them on a deal in Chicago that fell apart at the end. And it was hard for both sides, right? But that happens. But that speaks to our relationship. So they were looking to do one of their retail showrooms in San Francisco. And they had a great experience with us, even though it fell apart in Chicago. They called us and said, look, we found this building in Hayes Valley. It's a service center currently underutilized in a great location, and we need a landlord who can help us. So we partnered with Rivian, bought the building, had a lease in hand with them, and then underwent a 2-year redevelopment and renovation of this old auto body service center into their new showroom flagship. So it serves two purposes. It has their traditional retail space, but then they were also able to repurpose the service aspect that was already there and use that for their service center in the city. So it's a great example of a tenant having foresight to say, look, this landlord knows how to operate and execute in these markets. They can be a good landlord partner for us. And then from their perspective, obviously they have sustainable initiatives and all of that. They were able to repurpose that building and create something for the long term, and they're very proud of it now, and it's a showpiece.
It sounds like you're really successful because you're following what the tenants want, and that's a great example of that really happening. Are there other examples where you moved in a direction because of what you were hearing from the retailers themselves?
I think that's a great question. We've always done a really good job of evaluating acquisitions based on retailer feedback. So there hasn't been an example lately where we've said, okay, we need to quickly go invest in this market.
Right, because you guys don't do that. You're very thoughtful.
Very thoughtful. We want to be experts in operating where we know. And but we do take cues when we talk to retailers. So if we constantly hear retailers saying, hey, San Francisco's back, I'm keeping an eye on it, that means we're keeping an eye on it, right? Because we don't want to miss out on a great opportunity. And we want our tenants to be the ones that come to us at scale and say, hey, I'm looking to expand in these 5 markets. Can we figure something out? So we always want to have that optionality. But we are taking a moment when we do get that feedback to then look at a submarket and say, if I've heard this from 5 tenants lately, we should probably at least spend a little bit of time on the research and figure out if there is a moment in time for us to invest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we have not talked about Chicago. So you guys are in Gold Coast?
We are.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about Chicago.
Okay, Chicago, that's our hometown, right?
That's right. I'm totally blanking. That's where I met, when we met in person before, it was in Chicago.
That's right. Yep. We're based in Chicago. We do a New York office. So Chicago is our backyard. And we do invest in the Gold Coast. We also have Fulton Market.
Right, of course.
We've historically been in Lakeview. We've had Southport and some of the other smaller neighborhoods. But right now, we are really focused on what's going on in Michigan Avenue.
Yeah. That's the new buzz, is comeback time
really
for Michigan Avenue.
And it's so exciting. I've lived in the city for a really long time, and I have shopped Michigan Avenue and seen it go up and down. But right now, there are so many retailers opening and planning new stores that for the city, it's a very exciting moment. But obviously for retail and for investing, it's a very exciting moment because we finally come out of the bottom and we're making it through the headlines. So, over the last 12 months, there's been a handful of really interesting flagship openings. Aritzia did a ginormous flagship. It was the second store in the market. They have one in the Gold Coast. They did Michigan Avenue. Aloe opened. They're also one of our tenants. Uniqlo just had a huge flagship opening. They left Michigan Avenue and were on upper floors, left the market, came back and did a flagship, which is doing very well. And then up and down the avenue, there's been a couple of new deals that we've heard lately with brands that, you might not be thinking about are relevant again, like Gap, for example.
Which Gap is back, too. That's the new buzz, too.
It is. Yeah, they're staying relevant with the Gen Z customer, which is great. So Gap's making a comeback. Garage, which is also a popular retailer, is in the market. There was I'm going to forget the name of the tenant, but it was the chocolate museum.
Oh, is it the Hershey's one? Oh, no. I
No.
know what you're talking about. It's the Candy Hall of Fame.
Candy Hall of Fame.
They
Thank
just
you.
announced
Thank
for
you.
Michigan Avenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a little bit of experience, a lot of retail, and then at a macro level, they just announced the Marriott luxury hotel at the Hancock, which is going to be the addition. So that's a great stamp on Michigan Avenue, bringing luxury hotels into the market. And Water Tower Place is getting renovated.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. I don't know all the details, but that was kind of the real, oh boy, at the end of the street, and now there are plans for it. Do you know any of the details?
Not specifics,
Yeah.
but I know that they're going to put a lot of money into it, really create a little bit more of an approachable offering than what there is now, because the way that people shop and the way that that building lays out,
Yeah.
it just doesn't align. So I'm excited to keep an eye on it because it's going to make a huge statement.
Yeah, that was like when it opened, like the probably, I don't know, the first urban mall in the U.S. and just so successful. And it was even not that long ago. It was still doing fine, but
Yeah.
the pandemic really took it out of it. So yeah, it's great to have a great anchor. That's the north of Michigan on the north end of Michigan Avenue, and then you've got that wonderful Apple store down at the south end on the river.
That's right.
Here's a question, and I'm going to see if you answer it like most people answer it. What's your favorite property in your portfolio?
Okay. My favorite property, I'm biased because I was responsible for this.
Okay.
And we actually don't own this anymore, but
Oh,
149 Newberry Street in Boston.
which one is that?
So that is known as the Allo and Google building.
Yep.
It's right at the intersection of Dartmouth and Newberry.
Yep.
It was a parking lot for about 30, 40 years. And we were able to get that property and redevelop it into Class A retail and office in the best submarket in Boston.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the way most people answer it is, oh, they're like my children. I can't choose just one. You had the right answer because we always have a favorite.
Of course.
We're just not willing to save it. Yeah. But you don't own it anymore.
We don't.
Okay.
We did sell, but we are advising the current ownership.
Yeah.
And helping them lease more of the office space because we are experts in boutique office, and they valued the history that we had with the building, and it's a great relationship.
How long do you typically hold a property?
It depends. I would say 3 to 5 years is the typical horizon. We do have a value add strategy, so typically, buy, fix, sell, but it does depend on the partnership and the investor and kind of the life cycle of when we want to hold the asset. Our goal is to hold these assets forever because we believe in the locations. And one of our buildings in SoHo I mentioned is a great example of that. We bought 7276 Green, which is the king of Green Street, in 2012. With our partner at that, we leased the vacancy to Patagonia. They recapped us out of the building, and then we recently reacquired it with a new partnership.
Oh my gosh.
Last year. So because we believe in the retail, and we know that there's always going to be longevity there.
Are there some other notable acquisitions or other stuff going on that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, we actually do have a very vibrant pipeline right
Okay.
now. A lot of it I can't share just yet.
Well, it's a reason to come back.
Exactly, but we are doubling down in the markets that we already own in. So
Okay.
we do best when we have scale in a market. So we are looking at things in New York, of course. We are looking at things in Boston. There's a lot going on in Chicago that we're very close to. We are spending a lot of time in South Florida. So we own in Coconut Grove in Miami, and we historically have owned in the Design District. But we're looking outside of, the major Miami metro and kind of looking at the Tampa area. We're looking at West Palm Beach. We're looking at everything that's going on because we're getting feedback from retail that we should be looking there. So we're getting smart about that. And then there's a couple of things in San Francisco that we really like as well.
Okay, cool. Downtown San Francisco?
Downtown San
All
Francisco.
right, that's coming back too, baby.
It is, yeah. I was there recently, and it felt like a different city. I think if we're not focused on it as urban retail investors, we're going to miss out on some pretty great opportunities.
Yeah, right now is the time, I think, to jump in with retail in the city of San Francisco. Like the neighborhoods, like the Bay Area, there was no real downturn there, but in the city, there was a moment where it was struggling. But the mayor's been doing a lot too. I've been really impressed with the direction the city's going.
Yeah, it seems like it's going in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you had tons of conversations all across ICSC. Our conversation right now is the last thing I'm doing at the conference. So what's something that you picked up in a conversation that you thought was interesting and you'll take home with you?
Wow, I had a lot of different types of conversations in some years. In the last few years, it's been heavy leasing. Let's get this deal done. Let's get that done. This year, it was a lot of high-level conversations about, with different tenants, with different partners that we currently have, capital markets, et cetera. I think the takeaway is more general, not super specific, but especially with the retailers I met with, everyone seems still very ambitious and not really pausing on what they're doing, especially in the urban space. I heard consistently that tenants are expanding in smaller numbers. So, a few years ago, it would be, I'm going to do 100 stores. Now it's very thoughtful. I'm going to do 6, I'm going to do 8, and they're going to be in this location. And it seems like everyone is even more data-driven than they were before because they know that they need to perform. And they're very specifically focused on location. So I think if I had to summarize, it would just be, it was a very positive environment for urban retail, and the tenants are excited about what they're doing. And I guess if there was one downside, which is good for us, is that people are having a hard time finding good space.
Yeah. So Whitney, thank you so much for joining me today. I love talking about the cool neighborhoods, and you know way more than me, so I'm learning a lot about these. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And if you want to hear more interviews and retail insights, you can subscribe to Where We Buy. We're on the iPhone podcast app. We're on Spotify. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search for Where We Buy and hit subscribe. And you can, of course, find us on the web at wherewebuy.show. And that is a wrap.